He found her curled in the hay, dirt-smudged and trembling, and when she woke, her first words were a whisper, "Please don't send me back there." At that moment, the rancher didn't just offer her safety, he made a silent promise that her running days were over. The pre-dawn air cuts through the Wyoming valley like a blade, and rancher Colt Braddock pulls his coat tighter as he approaches the barn. At 32, he's a man carved from the same granite as the mountains surrounding his property, weathered, steady, and built to endure whatever hardships the frontier throws at him. He's expecting to find his usual morning routine, checking on the horses, feeding the cattle, maybe discovering that one of his heifers has wandered off again. What he doesn't expect is the soft whimper that stops him cold just inside the barn door. There, curled up in the hay near the old feed bins, like a wounded animal seeking shelter, is a woman. Her dark hair spills across the golden straw, and even in the dim light, Colt can see that she's barely more than skin and bones. Her dress, once probably a decent blue cotton, is now torn and stained with mud and what might be blood. Her feet are bare, cut and swollen from God knows how many miles of running. She stirs at the sound of his boots on the wooden floor, and when her eyes flutter open, they're wide with terror that hits Colt like a punch to the gut. She scrambles backward into the hay, pressing herself against the barn wall with the desperate energy of something that's been hunted. "Easy," Colt says, his voice gentle despite the shock coursing through him. He raises his hands slowly, the way he would approach a spooked horse. "I'm not going to hurt you." But she's shaking her head, tears streaming down her dirt-stained cheeks. "Please," she whispers, her voice hoarse and broken. "Please don't send me back there." The words hang in the air between them, carrying a weight of desperation that makes Colt's chest tighten. He's seen fear before in wounded animals, in soldiers during the war, in his own mirror after Sarah died. But this is different. This is the kind of terror that comes from human cruelty, the kind that leaves scars no doctor can heal. Before he can respond, before he can ask who she's running from or what "there" means, her eyes roll back, and she collapses into the straw. Colt doesn't hesitate. He scoops her up in his arms, surprised by how light she is, how fragile she feels against his chest. As he carries her toward the house, one thought echoes through his mind. Whatever hell this woman has escaped from, she's not going back. Not on his watch. If this story already has you gripped, hit that like and subscribe. We've only just begun. Colt's sister Fern appears in the kitchen doorway, like she's been expecting this moment her entire life. At 28, she's got the same steady strength as her brother. But where Colt builds walls, Fern builds bridges. She takes one look at the unconscious woman in his arms and immediately springs into action. Upstairs, second room on the right, she says, already heating water and gathering clean linens. Poor thing looks like she's been running for days. They settle the woman into the guest bed, and Fern takes over with the gentle efficiency of someone who's tended to broken things before. Colt hovers in the doorway, unsure whether his presence will help or terrify their unexpected guest when she wakes. It takes 3 hours for her eyes to flutter open again, and when they do, they dart around the unfamiliar room with the quick, assessing gaze of someone who's learned to identify escape routes before anything else. Fern is sitting in the bedside chair, hands folded patiently, radiating the kind of calm that comes from dealing with spooked animals and frightened children. "You're safe," Fern says softly. "My name is Fern Braddock. My brother Colt found you in our barn this morning." The woman tries to sit up, winces, and settles back against the pillows. When she speaks, her voice is barely above a whisper. "Elira. My name is Elira Dane. It's a beautiful name, old-fashioned and musical, and somehow it fits the delicate bone structure of her face, despite the fear that shadows her features." Fern offers her water, which she accepts gratefully, drinking like someone who's been thirsty for far too long. "Where did you come from, honey?" Fern asks gently. How long have you been traveling? But Elira's face closes off, like a door slamming shut. I can't. I just ran. I had to run. Her hands twist in the clean sheets, and Fern can see rope burns around her wrists, faint but unmistakable. The sight makes Fern's jaw tighten with anger, but she keeps her voice level. Well, you don't have to run anymore. Not today, anyway. When Colt finally enters the room, Elira shrinks back against the headboard, her breath coming in quick, shallow gasps. She won't meet his eyes, won't let him get closer than the foot of the bed. It's then that Colt understands this isn't just fear of strangers. This is fear of men. Specifically, someone has hurt her, and hurt her badly. I'll stay downstairs, he says quietly, backing toward the door. You rest. Fern will take good care of you. But before he leaves, he adds something that will echo in Elira's mind for hours afterward. You're safe here. I give you my word. 3 days pass before Elira ventures beyond the guest bedroom. And when she does, it's only to help with small tasks that keep her close to escape routes. She moves through the house like a ghost, always listening, always watching, flinching at every unexpected sound. Fern finds her washing dishes in the kitchen one morning, sleeves rolled up despite the cool air. And that's when she sees them clearly. The rope burns on Elira's wrists are accompanied by older scars, thin white lines that speak of repeated restraint. When Fern gasps softly, Elira immediately pulls her sleeves down and steps back. I'm sorry, Elira whispers. I should have asked before using your kitchen. Don't you dare apologize, Fern says firmly. This is your home for as long as you need it to be. But honey, those marks on your arms, who did that to you? For a moment, Elira's composure cracks, and Fern catches a glimpse of the terror that's always lurking just beneath the surface. Through the kitchen window, they can see Colt working with the horses in the corral, his movements patient and sure as he gentles a young mare. He's not like them, Fern says, following Elira's gaze. Colt would die before he'd hurt a woman. You believe that, don't you? Elira nods slowly, but her hands still shake as she dries a plate. It's not him I'm afraid of. It's if they find me, if he finds me. That night, alone in her room, the memories come flooding back, whether she wants them or not. The farmhouse on the ridge, isolated and perfect for keeping secrets. The man who claimed he owned her, who said the backwoods preacher's ceremony made it legal, made her his property. The locked doors, the rope burns, the desperate planning that finally led to her escape through a thunderstorm. She remembers running barefoot through the mud, branches tearing at her dress, the sound of pursuit growing fainter with each mile. She remembers the moment she saw Colt's barn in the pre-dawn darkness and collapsed inside, believing she was finally too exhausted to run another step. Downstairs, Colt sits by the dying fire, cleaning his rifle with methodical precision. He's begun to piece together the truth from small clues: Elira's terror of loud noises, the way she positions herself near doorways, the healing wounds that speak of captivity and violence. Someone hurt her, and that someone is probably looking for her. He loads the rifle and places it by the front door. Whatever hell Elira escaped from, whatever monster is hunting her, they'll have to go through him first. And Colt Braddock has never been the kind of man to step aside. Sheriff Marcus Tillman rides up to the Braddock Ranch on a Tuesday morning, when the autumn air carries the promise of winter. He's a practical man in his 50s, more interested in keeping the peace than stirring up trouble. But the telegram in his pocket has put him in an uncomfortable position. Morning, Colt, he says, dismounting near the porch where Colt is repairing a section of fence. Got a few questions for you, if you don't mind. Inside the house, Elira hears the unfamiliar voice and feels her heart begin to race. Through the kitchen window, she can see the badge glinting on the visitor's chest, and panic floods through her like ice water. Fern appears beside her, takes one look at her terrified face, and makes a decision. Root cellar, Fern whispers. Now. Stay there until I come for you. Colt straightens from his work, his face carefully neutral. "What can I do for you, Marcus?" "Got a telegram from Sheriff Burke over in Millfield County. Says they're looking for a woman who went missing about a week ago. Dark hair, slender build, might be traveling on foot." Tillman's eyes scan the property as he speaks. Her husband's been asking all the local law to keep an eye out. Every muscle in Colt's body goes tense, but his voice remains steady. "Haven't seen anyone like that. Why would she be way out here?" "That's what I wondered," Tillman says, still looking around. "Seems like a long way to travel on foot." But the husband seems convinced she might have headed this direction. Says she's not. Well, she's not right in the head. Might be dangerous to herself. Colt's hands curl into fists at his sides. "Is that what he told you?" "That's what Burke told me," Tillman corrects. "Look, Colt, I know you keep to yourself out here, and I respect that. But if you see anything, anyone who might match that description, you'll let me know?" "Of course." Colt lies smoothly. "Anything else I can help you with?" Tillman mounts his horse, but pauses before riding away. "This husband fellow, Rig Carter's his name. He's offering a substantial reward for her return. Says he's worried sick about his wife." There's something in the sheriff's tone that suggests he might have his own doubts about Mr. Carter's story. After Tillman disappears down the road, Colt helps Elira out of the root cellar, her face pale and her hands shaking. "Rig," she whispers, the name falling from her lips like a curse. "He told them I'm his wife." That night, by the light of a single oil lamp, Elira finally tells Colt the truth, or at least part of it, about waking up in a strange house after being drugged at a dance in town. About a man named Rig Carter, who claimed a backwoods preacher had married them while she was unconscious. About weeks of being kept locked in a room, told that she belonged to him now, that no one would believe her word against his. "He said I was his property," she whispers, her voice breaking. "Said the law would always take his side over mine. And maybe he's right." Colt reaches across the table and covers her hand with his, ignoring the way she flinches at the contact. "He's wrong," he says quietly. "The law might be complicated, but right and wrong aren't 10. What he did to you was wrong, and I won't let him do it again." The next morning, Colt rides into town with the grim determination of a man preparing for war. He ties his horse outside Murphy's feed store and steps inside, knowing that if there's gossip to be heard in this county, Murphy's is where it starts and spreads. "Morning, Colt," calls out Jim Murphy from behind the counter. "Don't see you in town much these days. What brings you by?" "Need some winter feed," Colt says, though his real purpose becomes clear when he adds, "Heard there's been some excitement over in Millfield County. Missing person or some such." Murphy's face lights up with the eager expression of a man who loves sharing news. "Oh, you mean that Carter fellow?" "Yeah, he's been through here twice now, asking about his wife. Strange business, if you ask me." "How so?" "Well, for one thing, he's got a mean look about him. Not the kind of worried you'd expect from a man whose wife has gone missing. More like angry, if you catch my meaning. And the men riding with him." Murphy shakes his head. "They're not the type you'd want help finding a loved one." Colt pays for his feed and rides to the saloon, where loose tongues and flowing whiskey often reveal more truth than official channels. The bartender, a weathered man named Pete, recognizes Colt despite his infrequent visits. "Whiskey?" Pete asks, already reaching for a bottle. "Information," Colt corrects. "About a man named Rig Carter." Pete's expression darkens. "That son of a... Sorry, Colt, but that man's bad news. Been throwing money around, buying drinks, trying to get folks to say they've seen his runaway wife. But there's something off about the whole thing." "Off how?" "Well, he's got bruised knuckles and a temper that flares when anyone asks too many questions about this missing wife of his. Plus, I heard tell from a fellow over in Millfield, that this Carter owns a spread way up in the hills, real isolated place. The kind where a man could do whatever he wanted and no one would be the wiser. Colt absorbs this information like a sponge, filing away every detail. When he returns to the ranch that evening, he finds Elira pacing in the kitchen like a caged animal, her face drawn with anxiety. "You went to town," she says. Not quite an accusation, but close to it. "People will remember you asking questions. He'll know I'm here." "Maybe," Colt agrees. "But hiding and hoping isn't going to keep you safe forever. Sometimes you have to make a stand." That night, Elira tries to leave. Colt finds her near the main road, carrying a small bundle of supplies she's taken from the kitchen, her bare feet already bleeding from the rocky ground. She spins around when she hears his approach, her eyes wild with desperation. "I won't bring trouble to your family," she says, backing away from him. "I've caused enough problems already." Colt dismounts from his horse and approaches her slowly, the way he would a wounded animal. The only problem here is a man who thinks he can own another human being. And running away in the dark isn't going to solve that problem. "Then what will?" she demands, tears streaming down her face. Colt hands her the reins to his horse. "We stand," he says simply. "Together. You don't run anymore, Elira. We face this." The next few days transform the Braddock Ranch from a peaceful homestead into something resembling a fortress. Colt calls in favors from neighboring ranchers, men who owe him for help during hard times, or simply respect his character enough to stand with him when trouble comes calling. Tom Bradley, whose cattle Colt helped save during a blizzard 2 winters ago, arrives with his 2 oldest sons and a wagon full of ammunition. "Heard you might be expecting some unwanted visitors," he says simply. "Figure we'll stick around for a few days. Help with the harvest." Jake Morrison brings his expertise with firearms, having served as a cavalry scout before settling into ranch life. Any man who'd hunt a woman like an animal deserves whatever's coming to him, he declares, checking the action on his rifle. But the most surprising transformation is in Elira herself. Instead of cowering in the house while the men prepare defenses, she insists on learning to protect herself. Fern teaches her to load and fire a pistol, and despite her shaking hands, Elira proves to be a natural shot. "I won't be helpless again," she tells Colt one evening as they practice shooting at targets behind the barn. "If Rig comes for me, I want to be able to fight back." Colt watches her stance improve, sees the determination replacing the fear in her eyes, and feels something shift in his chest. This isn't the broken woman he found in his barn. This is someone reclaiming her strength, her agency, her right to exist without terror. "You were never helpless," he tells her. "You survived. You escaped. You found your way to safety. That takes more courage than most people have in their entire bodies." The quiet moments between them have taken on a different quality too. When Elira's nightmares wake her, Colt sits on the porch outside her window, his presence a silent promise that she's not alone. When he returns from checking the perimeter each night, she has coffee waiting, warm and strong enough to chase away the autumn chill. They don't talk about what's growing between them. There's too much danger, too much uncertainty. But it's there in the way she relaxes when he's nearby, in the way he finds excuses to work closer to the house where he can keep an eye on her, in the comfortable silences that speak of understanding deeper than words. "Riders coming," Jake calls from his position near the main gate. Through the dust of their approach, Colt can see 3 men on horseback, moving with the deliberate pace of people who aren't in a hurry because they're confident in their power. Elira appears at the kitchen window, her face pale but determined, Fern's pistol steady in her hand. "He's here," she whispers. But Colt can hear her, even from across the yard. Rig Carter sits his horse like a king surveying his domain, flanked by 2 men who look like they'd kill for the price of a drink. He's smaller than Colt expected, but there's something in his pale eyes that speaks of cruelty refined to an art form. I believe you have something that belongs to me, Rig calls out, his voice carrying the false pleasantness of a snake offering to help. Rig Carter has the kind of smile that makes children hide behind their mother's skirts and grown men check the location of the nearest weapon. He sits his horse with casual arrogance, like a man who's never encountered a problem he couldn't solve with money, threats, or violence. Mr. Braddock, isn't it? Rig says, his voice carrying the smooth confidence of a practiced liar. I believe we have some business to discuss. You see, my wife seems to have gotten confused and wandered onto your property. I've come to collect her and take her home where she belongs. Colt steps forward, his hands loose at his sides but ready to move if necessary. The other men, Tom Bradley, Jake Morrison, and the rest, spread out in a loose semicircle, creating a wall of determination between Rig and the house. Don't see any confused women here, Colt says, his voice level but carrying an undertone of steel. Just family and friends. Rig's smile never wavers, but something dangerous flickers in his pale eyes. Now, Mr. Braddock, I'm trying to be reasonable here. My Elira has always been delicate, prone to flights of fancy. Sometimes she gets ideas in her head, thinks she needs to run away from the love and security I provide. He reaches into his jacket and produces a folded document, holding it up like a trophy. I have the marriage certificate right here, properly witnessed and signed. She's my legal wife, which means she's my legal responsibility. I'm sure you understand. Through the kitchen window, Elira can see the forged papers that have become the chains binding her to a nightmare. She knows the signatures are fake, the witnesses paid off or threatened, the preacher probably dead or disappeared. But she also knows that in this time and place, a man's word carries more weight than a woman's, especially when that man has money and connections. Maybe you should ask the lady what she wants, Jake Morrison calls out, his hand resting meaningfully on his gun belt. Seems like she ought to have a say in the matter. Rig's laugh is cold and sharp. Ask her? My friend, you don't ask property what it wants. You simply collect it when it strays. His gaze shifts to the house, and Elira feels his eyes like ice water on her skin, even through the glass. Elira, darling, come out here. It's time to come home. The silence stretches taut as a bowstring. Then Colt speaks, his voice carrying the quiet authority of a man who's made his final decision. She's not going anywhere with you. Not today, not ever. Is that so? Rig's mask of civility finally begins to slip. And what gives you the right to keep another man's wife from him? Are you claiming her as your own property now? I'm not claiming her as anything, Colt says. She's a free woman, and she's made her choice. I suggest you respect it. The two men flanking Rig shift in their saddles, hands moving closer to their weapons. The air crackles with tension, everyone aware that they're standing on the edge of violence. Well, Mr. Braddock, Rig says, his voice now stripped of all pretense at friendliness, I can see you're not a reasonable man. That's disappointing. He spits into the dust at his horse's feet, a gesture of contempt that carries the weight of a declaration of war. But don't worry, he continues, gathering his reins. I'll be back, with proper legal authority this time. And if you continue to harbor my property, well, accidents happen on isolated ranches. Fires start. People disappear. You understand. As the three riders wheel their horses and gallop away, Colt feels the weight of what's coming settle on his shoulders like a lead blanket. This isn't over. If anything, it's just beginning. Inside the house, Elira collapses into a chair, her face buried in her hands. He'll be back, she whispers. He'll never stop. I should have kept running. But Colt is already moving, his mind racing through possibilities and preparations. Maybe, he says. But when he comes back, we'll be ready. The attack comes 3 days later, under a moonless sky that provides perfect cover for men with dark intentions. Elira wakes to the smell of smoke and the sound of Colt's voice, urgent but controlled. calling for everyone to take their positions. Through her bedroom window, she can see flames licking at the same barn where she first found refuge, now being used as a weapon against the people who showed her kindness. The orange light dances across the yard, casting twisted shadows that seem to move with malevolent purpose. "Stay in the house," Fern orders, pressing a loaded rifle into Elira's hands. "Watch the back windows. If anyone tries to come through, you shoot first and ask questions later." But Elira can see what's happening outside Rig, and his men have surrounded the property, using the fire as both distraction and destruction. Colt and the others are spread too thin, trying to fight the blaze while defending against an attack from multiple directions. A gunshot shatters the kitchen window, sending glass flying across the room. Then another, and another, as Rig's men begin their assault in earnest. Elira can hear Colt shouting orders, the crack of return fire, the sound of running feet on the porch outside. That's when she sees him, one of Rig's men, the one with the scarred face who always looked at her like she was a piece of meat, creeping around the side of the house toward where Fern is crouched behind an overturned table. He has his gun raised, and Fern hasn't seen him coming. For a moment, Elira freezes. All the terror, all the helplessness of the past months comes flooding back. But then she remembers Colt's words, "You were never helpless, you survived." The rifle kicks against her shoulder as she fires, and Scarface stumbles, his shot going wide. Fern spins around, sees the threat, and puts the man down with a single precise shot to the chest. "Good shooting," Fern calls across the room, her voice grim but approving. Outside, the battle rages on. Colt has managed to organize a bucket brigade to contain the barn fire, but the shooting continues. Rig himself appears in the doorway, silhouetted against the flames, his face twisted with rage and something that might be madness. "You should have given her back when I asked nicely," he snarls, raising his pistol toward Colt's back. Elira doesn't think. She doesn't hesitate. She simply acts, stepping through the shattered window with Fern's rifle in her hands and putting herself between Rig and the man who saved her life. "It's over, Rig," she says, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "I'm not your property. I never was." Rig's laugh is the sound of breaking glass. "You ungrateful little." He swings his gun toward her, but Elira is ready. The rifle speaks once, and Rig Carter falls backward into the dirt, his reign of terror ended by the woman he tried to own. The sudden silence feels almost as violent as the gunfire. Then, in the distance, the sound of approaching hooves, Sheriff Tillman, summoned by Fern's earlier message, arriving with a deputy and legal authority to clean up the mess. "Well," Tillman says, surveying the scene with weary eyes, "looks like this whole business is finally settled." He nudges Rig's body with his boot. "Can't say I'm sorry to see the end of him. Man was poison." As dawn breaks over the ranch, Elira finds herself standing next to the burned remains of the barn, still holding the rifle that ended her nightmare. Colt approaches slowly, his face streaked with soot and sweat, his eyes full of something that might be pride. "It's over," he says simply. "Yes," she agrees. "It's over." 6 weeks later, the Braddock Ranch has healed from the violence that touched it, like skin growing over a wound. The barn has been rebuilt, stronger than before, with new timber and iron reinforcements that speak of lessons learned and determination renewed. Elira stands in the doorway of that new barn, watching Colt work with a young Colt that reminds her of herself when she first arrived, skittish, uncertain, but gradually learning to trust. The morning sun slants through the doorway, painting everything in shades of gold and possibility. She's different now, and she knows it. The woman who sleeps in the guest bedroom each night bears little resemblance to the terrified creature who once hid in the straw. She stands taller, speaks louder, meets the world with eyes that hold strength instead of fear. The scars remain on her wrists, in her dreams, in the way she still checks locks twice before bed, but they no longer define her. "You're up early," Fern observes, joining her in the doorway with 2 cups of coffee steaming in the cool air. "Couldn't sleep," Elira admits, accepting the coffee gratefully. "Good dreams this time. I was thinking about after." "After what?" "After everything. After the trial. After the legal business is settled. After—" She gestures vaguely at the world beyond the ranch. What comes next? The trial had been a formality, really. With witnesses to Riggs' attack and Sheriff Tillman's testimony about the forged marriage certificate, the territorial judge had dismissed all charges against Elira and her defenders. Rig Carter's estate had been divided among his victims, giving Elira enough money to start fresh anywhere she chose. "Have you decided where you want to go?" Fern asks, though there's something in her voice that suggests she already knows the answer. Elira looks out at the ranch, at the horses in the corral, at the garden she helped plant and tend, at Colt's patient work with the young animal that's learning to trust human hand. "I think I'm already where I belong," she says quietly. That evening, she finds Colt on the porch, watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of purple and gold. He looks up when she approaches, and there's something in his expression that makes her heart race, not with fear, for once, but with anticipation. "Sheriff Tillman stopped by while you were in town," he says. "The judge made it official. Riggs' marriage certificate has been declared fraudulent. Legally speaking, you're a free woman." "Legally speaking, I've been free since the day you found me in your barn," Elira replies, settling into the chair beside him. "Everything else was just paperwork." They sit in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky deepen into star-filled darkness. Finally, Colt speaks, his voice carrying the careful tone of a man who's afraid to hope for too much. "Elira, I want you to know that you'll always have a place here, for as long as you want it. No conditions, no expectations. Just home, if you want it." She turns to look at him. This man, who saved her life without asking for anything in return, who stood between her and violence, who gave her back her name and her strength and her right to choose her own path. "Colt," she says, reaching across the space between their chairs to take his hand. "I want to stay, not as a guest, not as someone who needs protection, but as whatever we decide to build together." His hand tightens around hers, and the smile that crosses his face is like sunrise after the longest night. "I'd like that," he says simply. "I'd like that very much." Later that night, Elira sits at the desk in her room, in her home, with her family, and opens a leather-bound journal. On the first page, she writes in careful script, "Please don't send me back there. The story of how I found my way home." She pauses, pen poised over the paper, and thinks about the woman who spoke those words in a barn at dawn. Desperate, broken, convinced that safety was an illusion and kindness was a trap. That woman still exists inside her, will always be part of her story, but she's no longer the whole story. Outside her window, she can see the barn where it all began, and on its wall, Colt has left a single burned beam from the fire, not as a reminder of what they lost, but as a testament to what they survived and how far they've come. The next chapter of her story is yet to be written, but for the first time in her life, Elira Dane, soon to be Elira Braddock, knows exactly who's holding the pen. If you thought these were crazy, you won't want to miss what happens in this next video.